Here is something that makes no sense. A Toyota Camry with the 2.5-liter engine sold in California requires 0W-20 oil. That same Camry with the identical engine sold in Germany or Australia requires 5W-30. Same block, same internals, same tolerances, different oil. Why would Toyota engineer one engine but demand two completely different lubricants depending on which country you bought it in? The answer has nothing to do with weather and everything to do with money, emissions targets, and a calculation manufacturers made about your engine's lifespan. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this split exists and which oil actually belongs in your car. Section 1. The Global Oil Contradiction. This is not just Toyota, the pattern repeats across almost every major manufacturer. Honda sells a Civic with a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine. American owners get a manual that says 0W-20 synthetic only. Cross the Atlantic to the United Kingdom and that same turbo, same compression ratio, same bearing clearances specifies 5W-30. Mazda does it. Subaru does it. Even Ford and General Motors do it with their global platforms. So the obvious question is whether this comes down to climate. America is hot in summer and cold in winter. Maybe different regions need different protection, but that theory falls apart fast. Florida averages higher temperatures than most of Germany. Arizona runs hotter than almost anywhere in Japan. Yet American engines get the thinner oil while those cooler countries get the thicker stuff. If climate was the real answer, then Phoenix dealerships would recommend 5W-30 and Helsinki would get 0W-20. They do not. The real explanation has nothing to do with thermometers and everything to do with what happens inside a government testing facility before your car ever reaches the showroom floor. And that is where this story gets interesting. Section 2. The Corporate Fuel Economy Game. In the United States, every automaker must meet something called Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards, CAFE for short. These federal regulations force manufacturers to hit specific miles per gallon targets across their entire lineup. Miss those targets and the fines are brutal. We are talking millions of dollars for every fraction of a mile per gallon they fall short. So how does a company squeeze out that last drop of efficiency without redesigning an entire engine? They reduce internal friction, and the fastest way to do that is thinner oil. When a manufacturer submits a vehicle for EPA testing, switching from 5W-30 to 0W-20 can improve the measured fuel economy by half a mile to a full mile per gallon. That tiny difference on paper translates to enormous savings in regulatory penalties. Here is what that means for you. The oil recommendation printed in your American owner's manual was not chosen purely for engine protection. It was chosen to help the manufacturer pass a government test. A retired powertrain engineer told Automotive News that oil specifications are sometimes about paperwork more than engineering. That quote should bother you. And it gets worse. Section 3. The Viscosity Truth. Let me break down what viscosity actually means because this is where most people get confused. When you see 0W-20 on a bottle, that 0W tells you how the oil behaves in cold conditions. W stands for winter. The lower that number, the easier the oil flows when your engine is freezing cold. This matters for startup protection when oil needs to reach critical components fast. The second number, 20 or 30, measures thickness at operating temperature, specifically at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is where your engine runs under normal conditions. Here is the critical difference. A 20-weight oil is thinner when hot. It flows easier and creates less drag. A 30-weight oil maintains a thicker protective barrier between metal surfaces under heat and pressure. 0W-20 prioritizes cold starts and fuel economy. 5W-30 prioritizes high-temperature protection and long-term durability. Both work. Both protect, but they protect differently. The question is which priority matches your actual driving conditions, because what works perfectly for a commuter in Seattle might slowly damage an engine in Houston. And most American drivers have no idea they might be using the wrong one. Section 4. How engine tolerances change everything. Now here is a layer most people never consider: engineering tolerances. Modern engines, especially from Japanese and American manufacturers, are built with extremely tight internal clearances. The gaps between pistons and cylinder walls, between crankshafts and bearings, are measured in thousandths of an inch. These tight tolerances allow engines to run efficiently on thinner oils. Less gap means thinner oil can still maintain a protective film. This helps engines warm up faster, reduce friction, and pass emissions testing more easily. So yes, many modern engines were designed to run on 0W-20. That part is true. But here is what the manual does not tell you. Tolerances change as engines age. Every mile you drive creates microscopic wear. Those precision gaps slowly widen over time. By the time your odometer hits 80,000 or 100,000 miles, your engine is not the same engine that rolled off the assembly line. This is why experienced technicians often recommend stepping up one viscosity grade as mileage increases. An engine that ran perfectly on 0W-20 at 30,000 miles might actually benefit from 5W-30 at 120,000. Your engine grows. Your oil choice should grow with it. Section 5. America's real problem is not winter. There is a common assumption that 0W-20 exists because American winters are harsh. The thin oil flows better in cold weather, so it makes sense for cold climates. This logic sounds reasonable until you look at a map. Most of the United States experiences hotter average summer temperatures than Germany or Japan. Phoenix regularly hits 115 degrees. Houston sits in humidity that pushes engine temperatures even higher. Florida combines heat with stop-and-go traffic that keeps engines working hard for hours. Meanwhile, Germany and Japan, countries that specify thicker oils for identical engines, have milder summers than half of America. Here is what happens inside your engine on a hot day. Oil temperatures can climb past 240 degrees in heavy traffic. At those temperatures, thin oils start losing their protective properties. Independent testing from laboratories like Blackstone has shown that many 0W-20 oils lose 10 to 15% of their viscosity after 5,000 miles in high heat conditions. 5W-30 holds its thickness much longer under the same stress. So if climate was truly the deciding factor, Texas dealerships would push 5W-30 and Scandinavian countries would use 0W-20. The opposite happens. And now you know why. Section 6. Who actually decides your oil specification? Here is something that might change how you read your owner's manual forever. In many cases, the engineers who designed your engine do not get the final say on which oil goes in the book. When a vehicle gets certified for sale in the United States, the oil grade listed in the manual becomes part of the official EPA test submission. That specification is locked into federal paperwork. If a manufacturer wants to change the recommended viscosity later, they would have to recertify the entire vehicle. That process takes months and costs enormous amounts of money. So once an engine gets certified with 0W-20, it stays that way on paper regardless of what engineers learn afterward. This explains why some service bulletins contain interesting language. Phrases like 5W-30 may be used if 0W-20 is unavailable. That is manufacturer code for "we know the thicker oil works fine, but we cannot officially say it without regulatory headaches." The manual was written for compliance. It was written to pass government tests and avoid penalties. It was not necessarily written to maximize your engine's lifespan. That distinction matters more than most drivers realize. Section 7. Real-world testing results. Enough theory. Let me show you what actually happens when these oils go head-to-head in real engines. Used oil analysis labs like Blackstone receive thousands of samples every month from drivers testing their oil after real-world use. The patterns in that data tell a clear story. Engines running 0W-20 in hot climates consistently show higher concentrations of wear metals in their oil samples. Aluminum, iron, and copper particles that indicate internal surfaces are grinding against each other. Engines running 5W-30 under identical conditions show significantly lower wear metal counts. The thicker oil film keeps components separated even under heat and pressure. One comparison tracked two identical vehicles with the same engine. One owner used 0W-20 for 100,000 miles in southern summer heat. The other used 5W-30. The 0W-20 engine showed light varnish deposits on internal components and elevated bearing wear. The 5W-30 engine came back clean with wear numbers 40% lower. The fuel economy difference between them was less than 1 mile per gallon. So the thin oil saved maybe $40 per year in gas while potentially costing hundreds in accelerated wear. That math should make you uncomfortable. Section 8. The warranty question. Everyone asks. Right now, you might be thinking this sounds good, but what about my warranty? If I switch from 0W-20 to 5W-30, will the dealer void my coverage? Here is the legal reality. In the United States, the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act protects consumers from exactly this situation. Federal law states that a manufacturer cannot deny warranty coverage unless they can prove your modification directly caused the failure. Using a high-quality 5W-30 synthetic that meets the same API and ILSAC specifications as the recommended 0W-20 does not void your warranty, period. In fact, many manufacturer service bulletins quietly state that 5W-30 may be used provided it meets API SP or ILSAC GF6 standards. That language exists because engineers know it works. The legal loophole is simple. As long as your oil meets or exceeds the required certifications, your warranty remains intact. Many professional mechanics recommend making the switch after 60,000 to 80,000 miles, especially in warmer climates or for engines showing any signs of oil consumption. You are not violating your warranty. You are adapting to real-world conditions instead of laboratory test conditions. That is exactly what engineers do behind closed doors. Section 9. Why additives matter more than thickness. Here is something even most mechanics overlook. The additive package inside your oil matters more than the viscosity number on the bottle. Two different 5W-30 oils can perform completely differently depending on what chemicals the manufacturer blended in. Quality oils contain detergents that prevent sludge buildup, dispersants that keep contaminants suspended, and anti-wear compounds like zinc and phosphorus known as ZDDP. ZDDP creates a protective layer on metal surfaces that prevents wear during high-pressure contact. It is especially critical during cold starts and high-load situations. Here is the problem with thinner oils. Lower viscosity means the oil relies more heavily on these chemical additives instead of physical film thickness to protect components. Those additives deplete faster under stress. After 5,000 miles of hard driving, a 0W-20 oil might have lost a significant portion of its protective additive package, while a 5W-30 still has plenty remaining. This is why a premium 0W-20 synthetic with excellent additives can outperform a cheap 5W-30 conventional oil. Quality matters, but when comparing equal quality oils, the thicker viscosity provides an extra margin of protection that additives alone cannot match. Section 10. Turbocharged engines and thin oil. If your car has a turbocharged engine, everything I have said so far becomes even more important. Your turbocharger spins at speeds exceeding 150,000 revolutions per minute. It generates enormous heat concentrated in a small space, and the only thing cooling and lubricating those turbo bearings is your engine oil. Turbos are oil torture chambers. They demand lubricants that can handle extreme pressure and temperature without breaking down. 0W-20 can manage mild turbo applications under normal conditions, but in hot climates or during aggressive driving, thin oils often shear down to even lower viscosity within just a few thousand miles. Once that happens, the oil cannot cushion the turbo bearings properly. The result is premature wear, coking from burnt oil deposits, and eventually turbo failure. Major turbocharger manufacturers like Garrett and BorgWarner recommend 30 weight oils minimum for turbo longevity. This is not marketing. It comes from engineering data on bearing wear patterns. Honda specifies 0W-20 for their 1.5-liter turbo in America. That same engine in Europe and Asia gets 5W-30. Honda engineers know which oil protects turbos better. The question is whether you will follow the paperwork or the engineering. Section 11. What mechanics use on their own cars. This next part might surprise you. When professional mechanics service their own personal vehicles, most of them do not use 0W-20. I have spoken with independent technicians and dealership veterans who work on Toyotas, Hondas, and Subarus daily. Almost every one of them admitted they personally run 5W-30 or even 5W-40 in their own engines, especially those working in states with hot summers. One master technician put it simply: He said they use 0W-20 in customer cars because that is what the service invoice requires, but for his own engine, 5W-30 every time because it holds up better. Another added that the fuel economy difference is so small you cannot measure it at the pump. But the long-term wear protection is significant. These are professionals who see the inside of engines regularly. They watch what happens after 100,000 miles on thin oil versus thick oil. They see the varnish, the wear patterns, the components that fail early, and when it comes to their own vehicles, their own money, they choose the thicker protection. That should tell you something the owner's manual never will. Section 12. When 0W-20 actually makes sense. I want to be clear about something. 0W-20 is not bad oil. It absolutely has its place, and for certain drivers, it remains the correct choice. 0W-20 works well if you live in genuinely cold climates where temperatures regularly drop below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That thin viscosity flows faster on freezing mornings and protects components during the critical startup phase. It also makes sense if you drive mostly short trips under light throttle loads. Commuting a few miles to work and back without pushing the engine hard falls within the operating range 0W-20 was designed for. And if your vehicle is newer with low mileage and tight tolerances, the thin oil matches what the engineering team optimized for during development. Finally, if you are disciplined about oil change intervals and never push past 5,000 miles between services, the thinner oil can maintain adequate protection throughout its life cycle. Under these specific conditions, 0W-20 delivers exactly what the manufacturer intended. Efficient cold starts, minimal friction, and protection that matches the engine's design parameters. The problems begin when driving conditions fall outside this narrow window, and most American drivers fall outside that window. Section 13. When 5W-30 becomes the better choice. Now let me outline when 5W-30 becomes the smarter option for your engine. Consider switching if you live in hot climates where summer temperatures regularly exceed 90 degrees. That extra viscosity maintains film strength when heat would cause thinner oils to break down. 5W-30 also makes sense if you tow trailers, haul heavy loads, or drive through mountainous terrain regularly. These activities create sustained high pressure on engine internals that demand thicker protection. If your engine has accumulated more than 60,000 miles, the widening tolerances benefit from oil that fills larger gaps more effectively. Many technicians recommend the switch somewhere between 60 and 100,000 miles depending on driving conditions. Aggressive driving habits also favor thicker oil. If you frequently accelerate hard or spend time at higher engine speeds, the increased stress requires a more robust lubricant. And if you own a turbocharged vehicle, especially in warmer regions, 5W-30 provides the heat resistance your turbo bearings desperately need. The goal is matching your oil to how you actually drive, not how a government test facility simulates driving under perfect laboratory conditions. Your engine does not live in a laboratory. Section 14. How to make the right choice. Let me give you a practical framework for deciding which oil belongs in your engine. First, check your owner's manual for the complete specification, not just the headline. Many manuals list 0W-20 as recommended, but include 5W-30 as acceptable for high temperatures or heavy loads. That language exists for a reason. Second, consider your actual climate. If you experience summer heat above 90 degrees regularly, lean toward the higher viscosity. If you live somewhere with brutal winters and mild summers, 0W-20 might serve you better. Third, factor in your mileage. Lower mileage engines with tight tolerances can run thin oils effectively. Higher mileage engines benefit from stepping up one grade. Fourth, examine your driving patterns honestly. Short commutes under light loads favor thin oils. Highway driving, towing, spirited acceleration, and hot weather all favor thicker protection. Fifth, always choose quality full synthetic oil that meets current API SP or ILSAC GF6 standards. The certification matters more than the brand name. And remember that the same engineers who wrote your manual also approved 5W-30 for identical engines in other countries. You are not guessing. You are applying the same logic they use. The truth is simple. 0W-20 helps manufacturers pass tests. 5W-30 helps engines last longer. Now you understand why that contradiction exists and how to choose what actually fits your driving life. Drop a comment telling me which oil you currently run and whether this changed your thinking. Hit subscribe because next week I am exposing the engine warm-up mistake that destroys piston rings faster than any oil choice ever could.